What is the difference between a conversation and communication? How do you take risks simply by trusting your own intuition? And is saying, I'm sorry, please forgive me, the healthiest way to express remorse? If you thought therapy is only for those who have chronic psychiatric illnesses, or those with neurodevelopmental disorders, or somebody who's just too sensitive and needs to vent from time to time, you'd be surprised. Let me ask you this. Are those who go to the gym only there because they have diabetes, heart disease, or arthritis? If it's absolutely fine and actually common sense to train our bodies before we fall sick, why don't we do the same for our minds? This is Sonali Acharjee, and you are listening to Health Wealth, a podcast that wants to help you understand health in a simple and scientific manner. I think it's time to stop relying on a generational memory of what therapy is. It is no longer what your grandparents think it is. It's not what OTT shows you. It is a whole lot more than medicines and venting. I would say it is training, exploring, and self-investment. I'll give you my example. I used to have a huge problem saying no to anyone. The weight of other people's judgments and expectations would sometimes fall so heavily on me that I found it difficult to get out of bed. I underestimated the potential of my own simple ideas. I thought they were stupid before anyone could say anything. It was through therapy that I discovered the answer to why. Why did I do this? There is so much inside of you that influences your emotions, your reactions, your behavior, and ultimately your productivity and your relationships with the world around you. And therapy is where you really unravel who you are, what matters to you. What are these memories and experiences, some of them perhaps from very early childhood days, that have almost kept you captive for a large part of your life? I think it's a myth to say that after you go to therapy, you're not going to be sad any longer, you're not going to be angry any longer, you're going to be the saint who just forgives everyone and essentially have a very placid response or no response at all. Instead, what you learn in therapy is something more critical. You learn to fall in love with your emotions. You love to see them as your friends, you process them better, and you stop making decisions or reacting at the crest of your emotional wave. You wait for it to pass. You also learn how to implement boundaries with situations and people who aren't good for your well-being. And instead of turning to, say, cigarettes or alcohol or gossiping or feeling bad about it one day and okay about it another day, these mood swings that one goes through, you discover how to continuously build capacity to handle all sorts of bad days. It's great that we do have a new generation today which is more open to therapy. In fact, recently, FIAMA did a mental well-being survey, and it found that those below the age of 24 are more open to seeking mental health support today than those above it. And it also found that the same age group, about 8 in 10, said that our parents would encourage this and they don't have an issue with it. But given that the problems are also on the rise, we have more depression, anxiety, insomnia, addiction, broken relationships coming up, I think it's important that more than just one generation feels motivated to do something about it. And for me, it all started with one lesson alone, the very basics of what is therapy. And I thought, let's start this conversation on the same note. I have with me today Kanika Agarwal. She is the co-founder of MindPeers, which is a platform that gives therapy support and self-care support, and it also works with therapists and upskills them. Hi.
Hi,
Thank you for coming today.
pleasure.
How you just got back from Beer today?
Yeah. And I'm feeling much more colder here in Delhi, in Noida, than I was in Bir in Himachal.
Thank you for coming here straight from beer.
My pleasure.
I thought if we are going to talk about therapy, let's start with the most common assumption that people have. Is it venting? Is
No.
that what it is?
Venting is a subset of what you do in therapy, right? But as you covered, it's so much more. It's having conversations, proper professional conversations with professionals, again here, therapists, counselors of all kinds, to understand that if I'm showing certain patterns in my life, they're repeating, they're bothering me, I'm not being resilient, I'm behaving in certain ways in certain situations, which makes me feel inadequate, right? There are thousands, zillions of reasons, I think, that someone can go to therapy. I personally, because of my experience today, I tell to myself, and I know it's a fact, that therapy is a way of living. Therapy is simply tools that you're giving to your brain to every day train it, to polish it, to tell it that, hey, when certain situation comes, this is how I need to respond to it. This is how I need to feel it. That's what therapy is, at least to me, in my words.
And so, if I were to walk through the steps of therapy with you and just start at the very beginning, when do I know I need therapy? Because everyone is getting triggered today. I mean, it's not you just walk down the road or you talk to a couple of friends. Everyone is having issues and problems. Do they need therapy?
So, Sonali, see, this is how I bucket it, right? I feel that it's not about needing therapy. It's about asking yourself that, hey, do I want to live a better version of myself every day? And if you ask any human, they would say, hey, yes, why not? Right? Why wouldn't you want to have better days or a better version of yourself? So I feel that everyone should go for it. Do they need it? That's always a question mark, right? That's one. Now, when I bucket the kind of people who say that, hey, do you need it, or they don't need it, let's say, how do we bucket it? See, one is the very extreme one, which is a no brainer. So when you say that, hey, someone is actually genetically going through something, or we know that their situation, their condition is a severe one, where the symptoms are so severe that that, hey, the person cannot do without being to a therapist. So that's there. I won't talk about it, because then it's obviously a fact that that person has to go and seek professional help. But then let's talk about everyday life, right? You said that we go and we talk to our friends, or we just let it be. Now, the thing to think about over here is our modern world is getting so difficult, right? Because of technology, because of, like we say, whatever the Gen Zs, millennials are going through, the pressures and all of that. And sometimes you want better decision making. You want to understand, in clinical words, we call it executive functioning. That's very crux to our cognition, right? Do I take impulsive decisions? Am I able to multitask or not? The word that we use all the times, productivity, it all comes from here, right? Now, these are small skill sets that you need to polish. And if you want to be a better version of yourself, I would say go and take therapy and talk to a professional. Now, this bucket that I'm telling Sonali, I would say is a bucket where people would be like, you have no problem. Why do you want to go to a therapist? So the point I'm again trying to make here is that you don't need to have a problem to go and talk to a professional.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel it's not about needing therapy. It's about that, like you said, it was a fantastic example, that just like how you don't wait for diabetes or anything to happen, you could be the fittest person with all the muscles, but you still every day go to the gym to keep maintaining, the fitness levels that you have. In the same way, you go to a therapist to train your mind, to understand your patterns, and then consistently work on improving them so that you can lead a better life. Yeah.
So I'll tell you, when I started out, I went to, I would say, 10, 11 therapists because I was looking for the right space where I'm comfortable. And I needed somebody who's very visual. Okay, I
Yeah.
respond very well to visual tools.
Yeah.
So I finally found this lady, and I remember she had a Jenga on her table.
Yeah.
And I went because I thought, like, I have a problem saying no to people. And I'm
Yeah.
like, this is starting to affect me. I should do something about
Yeah.
it. So she took the Jenga and she started pushing out pieces. And she said, Sonali, every time you push out a piece, that's what you're doing when you're going against your values, when you're going against who you are. You're removing parts of yourself.
Yeah.
And you see, if I keep pushing it, what happens? You collapse.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know why, that really struck me that this is what I'm doing, essentially, removing parts of myself.
Yeah.
But it took that amount of time, it took that many people for me to get to this person.
Yeah.
How important is it that people don't get demotivated, if they face a few mismatches initially?
So Sonali, see again, I'll take a step back here. We are living in a society where it already takes a lot of courage to show up at the doorstep of a therapist, right? And this is a very common problem. Like you said, it took you 11 to 12 matches. In my case, it actually took 7 therapists to get to the right one, who did not judge me for the so-called first world problems that I have, right? It can get very demotivating, and that's where awareness is very important. Finding therapists is not merely a game of Googling and saying that, I have anxiety, and the first few that you see, let's just go and, go over there and just see that therapist. If I may add over here that this is one thing, because I went through that personal experience, the company that I run right now, it has taken us 3 years of lot of iterations, etc., to match the person to the right therapist in one go, right? And what has it taken? It has taken, we take a lot of factors, and even in general, like even if someone is not using a tool or let's say our thing to do that, it's about personality. It's about the conversation, the kind of conversations you want to have, right? Do you want your therapist to just be a listener, or do you want your therapist to someone also engage in conversations with you? Like I needed my therapist to be a very strict one, right? Someone who could be very, very strict and make me disciplined. You said that, visualizations work for you. So even in that case, you have to go deep down to see that, hey, do I want my therapist to be a cognitive behavioral therapy practitioner, CBT, which is the most common, or do I need them to be a REBT, DBT? And I don't, you can't expect, normal people like you and me to know that, hey, how does this work? How will I decide DBT, REBT before going through it? And that's again a problem because the education, the awareness about these things are not there. So coming back to the point that it can be demotivating, more than that, it was frustrating, at least for me. You have to keep repeating the same things again and again.
Yes, you do.
N number of times without knowing that, what is going to come out of this session, and then taking that decision that, hey, do I want to have another second session? So absolutely it can be demotivating. But then one thing I do want to impart over here, this is a trend that we have seen. We feel that whenever there are problems, let's cure it with medication, right? Which also happens in our physical health. And a lot of people, instead of first going to a certified therapist, actually jump on to go to a psychiatrist. And I'm not discouraging to go to a psychiatrist, but both of them have their own specific roles that they duly play in your mental health.
Yeah. In fact, if a psychologist does think you need medication, I have seen instances that they do refer you onwards because they can't medicate you.
Exactly. So that's what the process is.
Yeah.
But people go for that therapy to psychiatrists. And again, I'm not saying psychiatrists don't know how to do their job well, but they are I would say they're the professionals to give you the right medications for things. In most of the cases, they're not the people who would help you to have that talk therapy, the one that can help you to go and rethink and understand your brain patterns and things like that.
Yeah. So supposing I've gone through the entire process and I've found a therapist that I seem to think is going to be the correct fit.
Yeah.
What are the first few sessions going to be like?
Right. So the first session, it totally depends. Nowadays, if you're doing directly with the therapist, even the therapists have now started to have a 10-minute conversation. Firstly, to ensure whether they're able to take up that case or not. If you're going through marketplaces, etc., then those marketplaces should make sure that the therapist that you're booking with is the right one for you, just to avoid the thing that we have talked about. Now, let's say you're going for your first session. The first session is all about understanding you, rapport building, understanding what is, let's say, the critical problems, so to say, if you're going for a problem solving, or what are the areas that you want to improve on. And you will see that when you are going for the first session, it's going to be 95% you talking, which a lot of people misinterpret is that they come out of the first session, they're like, oh, did I pay my therapist to just
Listen.
talk? And yeah, that I'll just talk and she's just going to listen, or they are just going to listen to me, right? And that's the thing that I want to clear out, that you have to give at least 2 sessions for them to understand your life. Most of the problems, I'm not again generalizing it over here, but at least 90% cases, the problems are stemming, our habits, our thinking patterns are stemming from what we have seen and done in our childhood. And it is difficult to transform them.
Yes.
So first 1 to 2 sessions would be understanding you. And it will allow your counselor, your therapist to basically start to note that, okay, this is what I need to pick. They will do their job of listening to you and picking up that, hey, this is the critical root problem that I have to start solving. From 3rd session onwards is where that they will start applying techniques. And there can be different techniques depending on what the therapist is basically, a professional in. So it can be a more question answer related technique. It can be a more artistic visual related technique. It can be situation related, that they will put you in situations. It can be more pictorial. I've had friends who have taken therapy where the therapist would bring stories to them, right? And they would put them in situations and they would say, if you were the character, if you were doing this, how would you go about it? And that helps you to reflect,
It does.
right? It brings things out of you. So first 2, knowing more about you, introducing, giving them a background of where you come from, where the problems are coming from and all of that. 3rd session onwards, practically, techniques will start happening and things like that. I also want to say here, like you said, that mental health is a beautiful and a subjective thing, which also means that maybe in the 3rd session, I went for a certain thing to discuss. By the 4th session, something really critical has happened in my life, and the entire narrative might change by the 4th session, right? So it all depends on the incidents, the things that are happening in your life, and story goes on from there.
No, I think consistency is so important in anything that you do.
Yeah.
And often this has happened to friends of mine. They'll go to therapy and after a few sessions you've talked.
Yeah.
So you do feel lighter. So that initial trigger that might have prompted you to go there, those emotions have gone.
Yep.
And then suddenly you feel, why am I here? What's left? There's nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
Or a lot of people go with a lot of intense shame and insecurities, or they're thinking things which they aren't used to expressing. So after a point, they'll come to me and they'll be like, Sonali, I feel like if I say this, I'll be judged.
Yeah.
They're so used to thinking that everything you feel which doesn't fit into good or bad, how do you speak the bad? And if you don't speak the bad, how is your therapist ever going to really understand where you're coming from? And it takes time for you to get that comfort level. How long does it take before you marry your first date? Everything takes time.
I don't want to answer that, given that all kinds of decisions are made nowadays with the world that we're in. But you're absolutely
it's true.
Right on that.
If your therapist is like your mind coach. Even for a fitness coach, you take time to really develop that rapport with them. Right?
It's a gradual process.
Yeah, and I also think it really helps to have a support group when you're going there. So my husband was super supportive. On days if I didn't want to go, he said, "I can see the progress. You go."
Yeah.
And that helps, right?
Yeah.
Did that also happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Sonali, I was very lucky that my family, my parents, like my story has been very different. That's how I learned that you need to be very preventive in this rather on the treatment side. I went for my first therapy when I was already going through severe panic attacks, partly because of something that you shared, which is not being able to say no. And that was one of my problems as well. But everything that happened to me was because I was running after being totally perfect. I was the golden child. To my parents, always winning in life, and suddenly when real life started hitting after I graduated and I started to fail in certain things, it developed a lot of fears in me. So I waited for my panic attacks to become very severe to the extent that I had to be hospitalized. And then I realized that, oh, there is something like this, there's mental health, and I have to go to therapy. So it was different for me in that case. But when all of this happened, and I told my parents that I need to do this, they said, please do anything and everything that it takes for you to become yourself. And that's the kind of, I think, support I've had. But it's also to do with us, like I've always been very vocal about it. Like if anyone asks, I can't feel shame at all. It's a very normal thing for me. It's like saying that, when you break your leg, you don't hide it from people. You very happily wear that plaster and you're like, hey, I'm going for my consultation, etc. I literally wear my need of therapy every day, very proudly, because I feel that it's not a shame for me. It's a very normal thing for me.
But in a lot of spaces or families, people take it very personally if you're going to therapy. If you have trauma, does this mean I'm a bad husband?
Yeah.
Or if you are, having anxiety, does this make me a bad parent?
Yeah.
You can be a great parent, but that still doesn't invalidate the anxiety or the trauma.
Yeah. It happened to me with my partner. He would say that, oh, am I not being a good listener to you? This was the very first time when when I said that I want to make therapy a consistent practice. And he would say, am I not a good listener? Why do you want to keep this consistent? But Sonali, it's a safe space. We humans always need, however much we ignore it, we always need someone to see through us for who we are. There are so many things that you personally don't probably want to be vulnerable to, people around you, to my partner, etc. To me, my therapist is like a mirror. I can be the good, the bad, everything. It's like be vulnerable in front of them, and I can just let it all out to understand that this is why you're doing what you're doing, or this is why you're behaving. So to me, it's like a safe space. Which however much people love you, you sometimes need a professional for that.
Yeah. And you said a word which is really trending today, safe space. It's all over Instagram. Mindfulness, green flags, glimmers. Is there any scientific truth to any of this? Or are we just tricking ourselves into sort of feeling better?
Okay, so when it comes to practicing mindfulness and all of these things, yes, there is a scientific thing which I don't know why no one talks about it. But I'm pursuing my master's in psychology and I've been doing a lot of reading. So this is what I've learned scientifically. What happens is, scenario, that our brain is distributed into 3 sections. The mammalian brain, which is the most lowest, right, is the one that develops as soon as you're conceived in your mother's womb. This is something that all animals have. Every living creature has the mammalian brain, and that's the most basic form. What makes us humans different is the third one, which we call as the new part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, and that's where all the emotions, your all the action of the amygdala, etc. happens. So I won't get into too much science, but when you practice mindfulness, you're actually training the front part of your mind. And because in mindfulness, what you're learning is patience. You are learning to feel every breath. You are learning slowness. What happens is that when you do that, your frontal cortex is getting trained to observe things. It is getting trained to respond and not react. So, what happens is when you're practicing mindfulness and you're training it consistently, you would know that if any situation happens, I have to be resilient and I don't have to let my, anxiousness take over. I have to observe, think, and then respond. So, all of these things are to train the various neurotransmitters, the various parts of your brain, and that's why they help.
Yeah.
So, so we don't say do mindfulness just for the sake of it. Like,
Yeah.
there's a proper science behind it.
There's also science behind unraveling your memories, isn't there?
Yeah.
How do you we both seem to have a problem saying no.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure my core or from the reason why I can't say no might be very different from yours.
Yeah.
And for me, it was super surprising, it was just a need to be accepted.
Yeah. Same
know?
for me though. But
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. To fit in.
Yeah, but the memory which triggered that need to be accepted, of course that comes into my reality. And I wouldn't have thought it possible to have traced it so far back in time.
Yeah.
That something, two things happened in school and that's it.
Yeah.
So there is a science to this memory backwardness as well, right?
Yeah. So I won't go into the details, but it's very simple. Like I said, when you're born, the most ripened part of your brain is just the mammalian brain. And as you're growing up, the other parts are developing. And how are they developing? They're developing according to the situations that you face. So if as a child, like in my case, I openly, talk about it. As a child, I have always grown up seeing situations where I had to do something, I had to achieve something to be given love.
Yeah.
Only if you will come first, I will give you a chocolate. Or I'm going to love you only if you come first. So if my brain has grown up, seeing that situation, then what happens? Then at 26, 27, when I'm running a startup and it fails, you suddenly start to feel that now I'm not going to be accepted or loved. And I had to be successful in that if I want to get that love, right? So the science, at least I'm not a psychologist, but the things that I'm studying, reading, etc., tells me, Sonali, that because the development of the brain happens as a child, all the situations, the way people around you behave, the things that you're being taught, the things that you're being seen, they shape up how you respond to situations.
Yeah.
And that's the science of it. And that's when you grow up, you show the patterns that you're showing.
So another reason I chose scientific therapy versus, say, alternate therapy, and there are a fair amount of those as well, was for me, it was super important. How do I measure progress?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Someone can say something like, I know I'm changing. Others are saying I'm changing. That's good enough.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure of that. I kept saying, what if I'm just feeling temporary relief? People have given me attention. I've talked about it. I went to a meditation resort. I'm feeling lighter. So, everything's fine now.
Yeah.
But then if I face the same triggers again,
Yeah.
the same patterns happen all over again. So it was actually when I went and I discovered therapy, scientific therapy, I realized there are tools to measure this. There are tools to see if you're masking or if you're just saying the right words or if you're actually changing that pattern.
Yeah.
When does change actually happen in therapy? And is this something that one should think of at the very beginning of treatment?
Yeah. So, Sonali, if people are like you and me, who love to measure things, at least I do, and who believe in logic, you should start asking yourself these questions from the beginning. Again, the reason why MindPeers came and I did it was because I really wanted the measurement of mental health to be possible. People say that it is subjective. Yes, it is subjective. But your mental health experiences is a summation of things that you have gone through in your life. It's a summation of situations, responses, emotions, and everything that happen on an everyday basis. So if you start to make sense out of all those things, you can always measure your mental health. There are two things that I want to tell you in this. First is, whenever you're going to counselors, therapists, so this is something that a lot of people don't know. You can start like once you've had your 2 to 3 sessions. In fact, good psychologists themselves will tell you that, hey, I want to actually diagnose you, or I want to test whether you are showing symptoms, let's say for ADHD, or are you showing symptoms for anxiety or not. And there are proper tests that exist. But I want to tell everyone that please get your diagnostic tests done only from clinical psychologists. They are the only ones who are allowed and who are equipped enough to do that. Right. The second thing, not sure how much it's related to the question that you asked, but I just want to say that nowadays, how people are measuring their diabetes, stressors. We are wearing wearables. We are going for all of these things, which is helping us with sleep measures, etc. as well. So this is again something that we are doing. Our gut, our food, are physical health parameters. So if someone is low on their vitamin D, they are 40% more prone to mental health things, especially anxiety. The reason is vitamin D produces certain neurotransmitters which help the mind to calm. So what I'm trying to get to is that please start to understand that a lot of your external factors also lead to mental health issues or mental illnesses per se.
Yeah.
A gut inflammation, just one very important fun fact, serotonin. Everyone knows serotonin is equally proportional to anxiety. If you're producing less serotonin, you would be anxious. Maximum serotonin in our body is actually not produced in the brain. It's produced in our gut. So if your gut is not doing well, if you don't have a healthy gut, there's a direct connection between your anxiety and your gut inflammation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, inflammation itself causes so many problems, right?
Absolutely.
So I know post-COVID, a lot of women did face hormonal imbalances, which then affected their moods.
Absolutely. And that's why women hormonal health is absolutely it's another Pandora box in itself when it comes to mental health issues. There are
I
so
was
many
shocked,
things.
when I first did my test of all 5 hormones. She's like, do you see this one is low, so that one is low.
Yeah.
That one is low, so this one is high.
Yeah.
Like, dear God, they're all linked.
Yes.
And it's just, it takes one for it to have this cascading effect, right?
Yeah. And when we say we are PMSing, PCOS, these are not just things that we're just talking about it. It's not something which is not scientific. When you're PMSing 15 days, your estrogen and progesterone levels are different, which leads to the change of anxiety levels in a woman's body. And these are all scientifically proven things that we're not talking about.
Have you ever seen a difference in therapeutic results between somebody younger and somebody older? Because I do get this a lot. If you meet somebody, say, above 60 today, they'll say, in our times, our family managed all our problems. ये होते ही नहीं थे कभी problems.
Yeah.
I have thought about it and I've realized we never had the media to spread awareness about it.
Yeah.
We didn't have a mirror to hold up to society and mental health at that time. So we really don't know.
Yeah.
And often they will look back upon their lives with unhappiness, or they look back painting themselves as some sort of heroic figure.
Yeah.
And you can see it. You can see that there is a reason, but you don't know what the reason as to why they're doing it. If you were so sacrificial, why do you feel so bad about it today?
Yeah.
So you can go to therapy at any age, but are the results always the same?
I wouldn't know for sure. But what we've seen is, there's again a percentage is skewed here. The reason is, like you said for yourself, the younger population has become more open to all these things.
Yeah.
And because of that, because they're better educated in terms of the psychoeducation aspect of it, they know that. So I'll give you an example here. If you're a 30-year-old woman who has just delivered a baby, Today, probably there's a higher chance of that woman to know that if for the next 7, 8 months I'm crying continuously and I'm not feeling well, I'm not happy, it's because I'm going through postpartum depression. They know that I can label it this way, and they know that I can consult someone for it. But did our mums, did our families back in that generations knew that? No.
Yeah.
Right? So what we're seeing is that, of course, the results of the younger generation from therapy is much, much better. But that's also because they're coming with a open mind.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas what we've seen, Sonali, at least on our end, which I think is a great thing, we see so many youngsters bringing their parents to therapy.
That's amazing.
They tell us that, hey, I want my mother or I want my parents
Yeah.
to take therapy
Yeah.
to understand. And we're like, sure. And they're like, please, can you tell us how to convince them to do so? And in certain cases, we actually convert it into a family therapy sort of an arrangement where the parents also feel convinced and comfortable to come and try it. So right now, we see, of course, better results coming for younger generation because they're coming up with an open mind.
Yeah.
They're understanding, they know how to label, to know what's happening. But I wouldn't know factually that whether the results for the older generation or the 60 years above is how that's doing. I wouldn't know for that.
One very key reason that does tend to drive people to therapy is when their relationships fail. And I'm not just talking with a partner, even with their children, with their colleagues, with their parents.
Yeah.
Can therapy help repair that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. See, the reason is, and I wanted to say it previously also, you said that people from previous generation sacrificed or probably said they did not feel the need. You know why? Because, again, there's a science to it. In previous generations, self-care, independent lives or self-independent was not a big thing. People knew that we thrive in groups. Humans are meant to thrive in groups scientifically. That's our neurotransmitters, oxytocin, etc. So when a tribe member would win, one tribe member would win, it meant like a win for the entire tribe. When one tribe member loses, it's a loss for everyone. So they celebrate and they fail together. It's not the same anymore. Generations of today, if I fail, it's my failure. Right? And I feel we have taken self-independence in an absolutely different way. Which brings me, to the part that you asked, that now when any relationships don't work the way they should, we seek help, which is the thing to do because we still thrive to have that connection, which is a great thing, right? Couples therapy, still a very big stigma in our country. A lot of people go for couples therapy, but very secretively.
Yeah.
And we, at least in our experience, have seen that. I'm just taking example because partner therapies is the most popular. We have seen alliances which were going through so many issues. They have stayed in couples therapy for, let's say, 3 years, and they have rejuvenated. They have come back as new, right? So that's what therapy is meant for. We see a lot of stuff that we feel in our childhood. People come and discuss their parents, their families. That helps them to better their relationship with their parents also.
So it's clearly a whole lot more than venting.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much for sharing that. I'm pretty sure anyone who's heard this will be able to see therapy in a new light. Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing which happened with me when I was doing therapy is that as I was growing and as I was shedding past versions of myself, not everyone was as comfortable with it. Because, see, people get used to you being a certain way. And when you're growing and when you no longer want to be that way, it might not suit with their internal narratives as well. And for a long time, I almost struggled with that. I felt guilty that, are these things that I'm learning, are these new sets of behavior that I have, are they going to take away everyone from my life? Are they going to alienate people? And I realized it was just a very, very small percentage of people who were not coming to grips with this. And then somebody said something so powerful to me. It's something that I would want to share. They said, it is better you distance yourself from people around you than to spend your life distanced from your own self, where you just cannot connect with who you are and you just fundamentally don't even realize what it is you want. You're just running on this turbo mechanism, constantly trying to meet everyone's expectations, and that helped humongously. What do you think about therapy? Is it something that you would like to try, even if you're not sick, even if you really don't have any problems as such? Or do you think it's all just a complete waste of time? You can write your thoughts to us at pods@indiatoday.com or on 8588 And if this episode has helped you in any way, please do rate us. We are available on Apple, Google, and Spotify.